Oh, hi. I've always wanted to have a neighbor just like you. I always wanted to live in a neighborhood with you. Today is another episode of ZndBorn in the Wild, where the jungle cats are. It's the only time I get a chance to get out of the house. I reached out to the good folks at Audeze because there's a pair of headphones that I like. Turns out that their headquarters is in California, so we're going to head on down to Audeze HQ to take a look around. Why don't you come along? Headed over to Audeze, and the good news is that it's raining. There's a ton of traffic, but even better news, I only have an hour left to drive. Pulling in, let's figure it out. Audeze. We're here, very excited. Let's go see the good folks at Audeze. The good folks at Audeze. That's why the good folks at Audeze take it from me, Morgan Freeman. So this was the original poster in the garage.
That's correct.
When you guys launched.
And of course, every light had one of these back in the day.
Of course.
The founders thought, wouldn't it be great if we had a name for the company that was like a journey through audio? Audeze's a journey or travel, right? Mm-hmm. So they came up with the spelling of Audeze.
Did you guys get that? That's the origin of how to pronounce the name Audeze. Okay? So when you think of Audeze, think of Odyssey.
So let me give you a little, how can I put it, a little science lesson on planar magnetics.
It's science.
They're quite different than a regular headphone driver. Regular headphone drivers are generally scaled down versions of these conventional speaker drivers. So you've got a voice coil and a magnet and a spider and all these glue joints. You have the mass of the surround as well as the cone material. It makes it kind of bulky and there's a lot of mass to move. So with planar drivers, you don't have that. You have a very, very thin film. And the film is a couple of microns thick, and how thick it is depends on our particular models. They do vary. And then you also have to put some type of conductive material on top of it. In this case, we use aluminum. That's why this is silver. Otherwise, this would look clear. This is about, if you're familiar with saran wrap, it's kind of like saran wrap, but even thinner. And some of our products are as thin as a red blood cell. And so if you have enough magnetic flux or density to drive that film and the aluminum in this case, then it becomes very, very accurate in terms of reproducing transients or the impulse response. So sounds that have like hitting the snare, kick drum, popping strings on a bass, explosions, car crashes, that initial percussive wave comes across very, very true on a planar driver. It's difficult to do that with a dynamic driver. Not that it can't be done, but it usually requires a more exotic and more expensive dynamic driver to achieve that sort of thing. So because this is low mass, it's easy to move. As you can see, very few moving parts, just one thing. No glue joints, none of that other stuff to deal with. The other thing we do that's different than everybody else is that some years ago we pioneered using lasers to etch the voice coils. So lasers actually cut through this aluminum material for the voice coil. So it's very accurate and gives a very clean cut. Other manufacturers were still stuck in the dark ages of using what we call chemical etching.
Sure.
So if you're familiar with how printed circuit boards used to be made, like you put some copper on it, you put resist, you put in a chemical bath, it eats it away, whatever's left is still conductive. The problem is you get, with chemical etching, what we call, I think the highly technical term is mouse bites.
All right.
So if you look at them under a microscope, it's like little flaky, chunky edges or whatever, like a mouse has been biting on them or whatever. So you can't make those very consistent, and you can't make them close. And so if you notice, the patterns tend to come, how can I put it, narrow and wide across. And that corresponds to where the magnets are across the driver. And for example, this is the finished driver assembly. That's with the magnets and the frame and everything that we use in the LCD-X, which you have, and the LCD-XC, which you just listened to. So this has the magnets and the phaser wave guides. And of course, the backside.
Okay.
So this is actually the driver inside an LCD-X or an XC, for example. And the 3 and the 2 would look very, very similar. There can be some differences in the number of wave guides and magnets we use, the winding, so to speak, that we use for the voice coil. Some are of lower impedance, some are of higher. There are some difference in sensitivity between the different models depending what their ultimate use case is. Now, another thing we have, another patent, is our flexor magnets. Now, normally, for those of you who didn't fall asleep during science class, you remember that magnets have a north pole and a south pole.
Sure.
And there is an even distribution of magnetic density or flux between those poles. We changed that. So imagine if you could take a magnet and actually bend it in a U, so all the flux was on one side. That's what we're able to do with our flexor magnets. So this is sort of a demo case. These are 2 magnets that we use. These are our flexor magnets. By the way, this is N50 neodymium magnet material. Here's just a steel bar, and I'll pull it apart. Easy. Doesn't make too much noise. Everything's cool. Life is good. If I turn it to this side, which is, how can I put it, the fully active side, much louder sound, much stronger to pull apart. You know, you got to work out at the gym and whatever. And this enables us to make a magnet that is either twice as powerful or twice as efficient in the same size, or one that's the same power but in half the size. So it does give us the ability to make a much more efficient magnet structure or a more powerful one at the same time.
That makes a lot of sense.
End of beginning science class of planar magnetics. Thank you.
What's that? Am I back home at the studio? No, of course not. I'm in LA, and that means... So, I have time to talk to you guys. I just want to take a second and thank Audeze for having me at the facilities. Good news is that I got my hands on something that I really do want to show you. Oh, I think we're moving. Wait, hold on. Let me call you back. Let me call you back. So where was I? I want to thank Audeze HQ for having me. I want to thank you guys for taking the ride with me. I left Audeze HQ with something fun that I want to show you guys.